I would now like to hand over to our speaker this evening, Mr. Doug Avery. Diolch I ti, Doug.
Yeah, good morning, good evening to everybody. Just hold on, I've just got to get my, there we go. There we go. How's that? Hello, everybody. It seems like just the other day that I was actually in Wales, and gee, a lot of water has passed under the bridge since then. Today, I want to talk to you as individuals, and I want to concentrate you onto how you think about things and how you deal with the things that are going on in your life. As we're all aware, globally at the moment, we have a lot of challenge going on. So I'm just getting a little bit organised here. That's better. I'm going to show you a PowerPoint, and I'll be finishing in time that you can ask questions. I'm thinking from New Zealand here, there's a lot of challenge. We've obviously, we're actually out of lockdown now, but I'm sure that in your country there's a lot of challenge as well. And so I'm going to open up my PowerPoint. Slideshow from the beginning. Today my talk's bouncing forward from a crisis. I don't know anyone in this country that hasn't been affected by COVID-19, and we seem to go from one crisis to another, and in between there's some amazing parts. I want to ask you today, what's your current story? What's the story if I was in your house at the moment? What's the story that you would be telling other people? What's the story that you'd be sharing with your family? Is it a happy story? Is it a sad story? Is it a story of hope? Or is it a story with some challenge? My profession now, I spent 46 years as a farmer, but I now call myself a storyteller in a kind of a way. We are all storytellers. So I want you to think about what your current story is, but I'd also like you to think about your past story. Is the story that you tell about your past, is that happier or not than the current story? Or was it better in the past, or was it better now? But the most important thing I want to focus on tonight is your future story. I would like you to think now, where would you like to be in a year's time? And as I work through this presentation, you'll understand the significance of that. When you start thinking into the future, you start getting the presence of your energy in your mind to concentrate on the things that you need to do to take that kind of journey. That's a picture of a car, well, sort of a car. When you look at it, to start with, it's just a car. Then when you look closer, it's sort of kind of not really a car, and it's hard to know if you hopped in the driver's seat there exactly what you would expect to happen. Life's a wee bit like that. When we look at life, we sort of have a picture of what it should be like, but in reality, when we actually get into drive it, it's always something else. The thought pattern that I put behind that is when you look at things in a different way, when you choose to look at things in a different way, the things that you look at will appear different. And that's all. Yeah.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you. We can't see your PowerPoint presentation at the moment, I'm afraid.
Oh, sugar. What have I got to do to get that up?
Do you have a share screen button?
Yep.
Just click the green share screen button.
Oh, there we go. Sorry, that just appeared on me before.
Thank you. That's there now. Lovely. Thank you very much.
Thank you for interrupting. So there's the car. It makes quite a difference when you can actually see it. If you look at that car, you'll see it doesn't make any sense. It's not kind of right. And if you think about life, it's exactly the same. When you choose to take a different view, the things that you look at appear differently. So I want to start off now with, what is your why? Why are you here, and what is the values that you want to take into the world? When I think about myself, my why is centered on what my head thinks and what my heart thinks. A great place to start on any journey is to have a strong sense of your why. And there are 4 basic pillars of well-being. Here in New Zealand, I spend quite a lot of my time working with broken people. They're often out of love. Some of them might be out of connection. Some of them might have lost their purpose. And some of them might have lost their hope. I have never ever worked with anyone who has those 4 pillars in place: love, connection, purpose, and hope. Right at the moment, we have a lot of people losing their jobs in New Zealand. The first thing that happens with that is they lose their sense of purpose. When they lose their sense of purpose, then they start to feel depressed. Then they lose their sense of connection. They don't want to be connected with the people who they used to be, who are still successful. And when those 2 things connect in, they start losing their sense of hope. So one of the things that you can do, if you understand why you're here, then ask yourself, how are your 4 pillars of well-being? Love, connection, purpose, and hope. I, as I said, work with people who are breaking. I have never worked with a person yet who has those 4 things in place. What an awesome place to start to think about your own well-being, is to think about, are you loved? Are you connected to people? Have you got purpose? And have you got hope? In the next 30 minutes, I want to give you some pointers of how you can build those processes. It's understandable in our lives that things from time to time will happen, relationship breakdowns. I've worked with heaps of people like that have had a relationship breakdown, but if they're still connected, if they've still got work and purpose, they will still have hope, and they will get through that period of time. It's a wonderful thing as a human being to be able to offer those around you that you see struggling at any time the ability, if you stop and think, what is missing in their life? And then think, well, I can actually help connect them back into this life by introducing them to the sports club, or to a new work colleague, or to somebody else. So think about the 4 pillars of well-being. They are a place that we can all become natural connectors of humanity to each other to grow well-being. But if one of those things disappears, and that we can usually cope with one thing going, but if we lose 2, we start to lose our confidence, and we start to feel worried, and we start to feel fearful. And those 2 emotions are very, very destructive to well-being. Fear has 2 meanings. The first one, forget everything and run. Often when things go wrong for us, the first thing is flight. How can I get out of here? How can I leave what I'm doing? But the reality for most of us is that that is not an achievable thing. When I was going through my unending drought, I wanted to run, but I couldn't. There was nowhere to go, and no one wanted to buy the farm that was in dust around me. So I had to do the other meaning of fear: face everything and rise. It was the most hardest thing that I've ever done in my life, but it has been by far the most rewarding, because on that journey of facing my devils and staring them down and learning new tricks, I learned a whole new process of life. The world is made up by people who turn up. So in my work, I run into a lot of people who are like this person here. They wear on the outside a smile, but a quick dig down into their life, they are carrying deep troubles. It's one of the things that I love to talk to people about is, what are you carrying? I ask you each right now, what are you carrying? Sometimes it doesn't hurt to sit down with a piece of paper and write a list of the things that you are carrying. And then beside it, make a note. Which of all this list do we need to carry? Sometimes you have grief. Sometimes you have worries or troubles that you must carry. But more often than not, you are carrying things that you don't need to carry. I've many times worked with people through this process, just a piece of paper, writing down the list of the things that they're carrying, and in no time at all, helping them to concentrate on the things that they have to carry and not the ones they don't, so that they can actually carry them really well. After this webinar is finished, I'd love you to go and Google neuroplasticity. That's all about growing your mind. There's some wonderful little videos on there. And once you've watched one of those, you will realize the importance of thinking right, looking after your mind and brain growth, and learning what an amazing process we have. When I was younger, I thought that brain growth was something which basically reached its total at the age of 25, and then from then on, your brain just deteriorated. Recently, neuroscientists have discovered that it's actually possible, just like muscles in your body or anything else, you can carry on growing your capacity to think. What actually happens there is, if you think positively, the prefrontal cortex, the red part of that brain, that will grow and become more able. Every time something happens to you, you think, I'm going to find the good out of this. And you start thinking about the good things that could possibly come out of even the worst things that have happened to you. That part of your brain grows. So that means the highway of information that comes from, whether it's thinking, whether it's through your eyes, nose, mouth, ears, travels to the prefrontal cortex, and you deal with it best you can. Conversely, if you're a negative thinking kind of person, it will travel to the back part of your brain, and that is incredibly dangerous. So there's a little video on YouTube, neuroplasticity. After this, write it down, Google it, and watch it, and I'll let you learn from there. The exciting part of about that is we are all allowed to be involved in lifelong brain growth. Positive thinking helps this happen. And if you think about that, your journey is only just beginning. So I found myself facing a sign like that, average or memorable. I'd already learned that the average life I was living was not what I wanted to live. I wanted to at least have a memorable life. If you look at that sign, you'll realize there is no road that guarantees success, but just one that points to the other place. Resilience. It's your ability to bounce forward from your troubles. How many times have you been told when things have gone wrong, bounce back? The problem with bouncing back is you bounce back with the same settings as you had, without mitigating the opportunity that can possibly have to happen again. So I developed this ridiculously confident approach that when anything happened to me bad, I would try to discover what that problem was and bounce forward so that I would never have that happen to me again. That's what I call a mindset change. And it has led in my situation and hundreds of others to much better results. But if you're still not feeling okay, one of the most important things is to tell somebody else, I'm not okay. It's been a massive campaign here in New Zealand for particularly males when they're not feeling good, not to hide, not to run away and bury it all within oneself, but to come out and say, it's okay to say I'm not okay. So in my business, I've doubled the size of it twice in the last 20 years. And I get a lot of people coming to me saying, Doug, I would love to grow my business. And I say, that's wonderful. When are you going to start? I would love to help you. And they'll say to me, I'll start when I get the confidence. Don't know anyone that's ever started a big new set of business plans and started off with confidence. They'll look at me and say, oh, no, what I meant, Doug, was I'll start when I've got the capability. That's when I'm going to start. Yeah, I'll start when I've got the capability. And I'll turn to them and say, in any major step in life, there are 4 C's. You've given me the 4th C and the 3rd C. Capability is the 3rd C. Confidence is the 4th C. There are 2 C's that come before that. The first thing you have to do is commit. You will never start a major journey if you wait till you are feeling confident. So the first thing about life, and one of the great things about mental well-being, is most people find their mental well-being challenged because they don't understand the likely process that life will throw at them through any particular business pattern or life pattern. The 4 C's is a pretty typical state of the way it works. The first thing you must do is commit. And then the second one, and it's the toughest one of the whole lot, you have to exhibit courage. On any major move in life, there is always a period of time where you will have to endure a period where you don't have the capability, where you don't have the confidence, but you are just working through the sheer courage of the commitment that you've made. It's an interesting period of time. You'll wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning and think, gee, have I borrowed too much money, or have I not thought about this, or do I need more people in my team? The wonderful thing about the courage stage is it pushes you on to learn about developing capability. And then as you start developing capability, you will move to the confidence process. Practice the 4 C's on something small. As you feel the growing confidence of the expectation that you know after you've committed it's going to be hard, but you know that you can pull other people in to help you. And then once you've gone through a set of 4, do another. So that leads to vulnerability creates a pathway forward. Human beings hate feeling vulnerable. Most of us put up a shield to protect ourselves from other people seeing just how vulnerable we are. We think when we grow older, we will reach a period of time where we are no longer vulnerable. One of the great things that I found in my life was when I got older, I started to understand that I needed to accept that vulnerability was just a part of life. I became a fully functional human being once I accepted my vulnerability. The natural thing for us is to stay in our comfort zone. We're in control, there's a lack of risk, it feels very safe. But we live in a world which doesn't have an existing comfort zone. The reality is the world's always changing, it's always moving, there's always new things coming on. And so we need to be able to shift and grow and develop without needing that comfort zone if we want well-being. And to do that, you have to be prepared to step out of your comfort zone and go into what I call your courage zone. When you get there, you'll feel a lack of self-confidence. You'll feel vulnerable. You might even have fear. You'll try to find excuses. You'll be affected by the opinion of other people. Other people will say, no, you should have stayed here with me in the comfort zone. But if you're a person like me who wants to have a fruitful life, you must be prepared to develop the commitment and the courage to take these kind of journeys. And then you go into the capability zone. Once you start realizing in the courage zone that you have to develop capability, that's about acquiring new skills. Every learning that I do about mental well-being cites continued learning as a major key to well-being. This extends your comfort zone. You start to deal with the challenges and the problems of the new process, and then you get to the confidence zone. You've found purpose, you're living your dream, you've set new goals, and then it's time to start another set of 4Cs. I hope you've enjoyed me showing you those processes, because if you think deeply about your life and you want an exciting life, and most people do, take a close look at those and ask yourself, are you prepared to go through the discomfort of the courage zone and the capability zone to have that kind of growth? So there's a lot of different people in the world. I'm a resilient farmer. I wrote a book, The Resilient Farmer, and it's been a bestseller. I didn't used to have a resilient mindset. I had a resistant mindset. When I was like that, and you're probably asking, what's that? Do you know what that is? I don't like using this word, but I'm going to use it. That's shit. Shit happens. Shit lands on both resistant people and resilient people. But the biggest difference is how you handle that. And there it is there. Resistant people see it as a problem. Resilient people see it as an opportunity. They both get exactly the same amount of the shit landing on them, but it's how you deal with it. So I'm just going to skip through the difference in the way people deal with it. Resistant people avoid challenges, resilient embrace them. These guys give up early, and these ones persist after setbacks. Resistant people see effort as fruitless or worse. Resilient people see the effort, which I've just showed you the graphs, as a pathway to mastery. These people see it as a negative, they ignore negative feedback. They see it as something that's just really getting at them. Resilient people see it as the food for learning. These people feel threatened by others' success, and these people see other people who are successful as inspiration for their own journey. I work with hundreds of human beings. That list virtually decides where you're going to end up. I love this one-liner. It sums that list up beautifully. If you think you can or you think you can't, you will be right. I want to spend the rest of my life, whatever I have got left, trying to turn as many people as I can around to be resilient thinkers. That doesn't mean, being a resilient thinker, that everything will work out right. It just means when you have shit land on you, which we all do, COVID-19 is a big dose of it. How can I handle this? How can I make this so that it works for me? Remember, your life's ticking away. How many hours are you going to waste on fruitless thoughts around the problem? The dice of life. It's got risk on every face. From the moment you are born until the day you die, you face risk. It's not like a playing dice with 1 to 6 on it. Every time you kick the dice of life over, there is risk there. If your thought of mitigating risk is to stay in your comfort zone, I suggest you haven't thought about risk properly. The reality is we all face risk, but we can mitigate our risk by uniting our thoughts with opportunities that are in front of us. When I rebirthed my life 20 years ago, I was so excited about the immediate good fortune that started to come my way. I went out on the road around New Zealand trying to change the thoughts of farmers. so that they could, particularly in dryland New Zealand, so that they could enjoy the new fruits that I was reaping. I thought that if I did that, I would shift their actions across. But the moment I'd gone, and the halls around New Zealand were packed with people eager to hear me speak, they would go back to doing exactly what they'd done before, because they weren't confident enough to make the decision to change, or they didn't think that they had the capability. After 3 years, I decided I was wasting my time. I decided that I was probably better to stay at home. And then it dawned on me, I was trying to change the wrong thing. I dropped down to a lower level and I started to work on, what do you believe? What's your story? What's your current story? What's your past story? But most importantly, what's your future story? How can I help you to create a wonderful future story? It's kind of an interesting thought pattern. When you drive a car, you look out the front window. When you want to see what's going on behind you, you look up at a little thing called the rear vision mirror. Life's a bit the same. We need to turn our energy to the journey that we're traveling in front and concentrate our energy onto that journey. The language that I put with that is, the future creates the present. It's kind of a different way of looking at things. You are probably sitting there thinking, if I do a great job today, it'll make tomorrow better. That's true to a certain extent, but to a more strategical and far deeper extent, when you can see where you want to be in a year's time, that will direct your energy into the most constructive way of organising. What can I do now to make sure that that journey occurs? And to that extent, I'm a passionate advocate of mentoring. Mentors are the most amazing way to accelerate your journey to a great place. I never, ever travel alone. I always have the people I need to help me journey from my comfort zone to my courage zone to my capability zone, and then to my awesome happy place, my confidence zone. But I never stay there for very long, because I know that the world is constantly changing and that I will need to change as well and step out of that comfortable confidence zone and start again on the next building journey of growing my life. All around us in the natural world, there are wonderful teachings, and I love the analogy of geese. Geese collaborate working together by flying in a V. The aerodynamic effect of that V means that geese can fly 71% further by flying in that V. If I reflect on my life, gathering a team together has meant more than 71% advantage over what I would have had if I had carried on like I did to the age of 44 as a lone flyer. Mentoring has changed my world, just like it changes the opportunity for geese. I was in the Orkney Islands of Scotland and I showed this slide and they all said to me, geese are a pest. If you are very successful, you can become a pest. When you look at that organisation there are several things going. Geese take turns at flying the front. So many people that I integrate with just fly the front always on their own until they're exhausted. If you stand out in your field and watch geese flying over, you'll hear them honking. That's some of the lazy ones at the back saying to the one at the front, you bloody beauty, keep flying and doing the hard work for us. But the smart ones in the team are saying, hey, boss at the front, would you like me to fly the front for a bit while you have a rest, while we keep the greater dynamic of this business going? And then the collective honking is positive, honking each other to greater heights. How are you going with your V formation? Maybe when you get off this, you'll start writing down a list of who you need in your V if you want to fly higher, further, and faster. Fleas are interesting things. I'm sure you all know what a flea is. They can jump 100 times their own height. If you pick a flea off a dog and you pop it into a jar and you quietly put a clear plastic lid on it, the flea will jump and he'll hit the clear plastic lid. He'll jump and jump and jump and hit the clear plastic lid. He won't understand why he couldn't get out of that jar. You can take the lid off and the flea will just sit there. In 1998, that was Doug Avery. I'd tried everything I could to unleash the grip of the drought on my farm, on my life, on my family, on my world, on my well-being. But I couldn't get out of that jar. And then one day, a university scientist said to me, Doug, I want to teach you how to jump a new way. He taught me about the power of legumes. If you look behind my head, you'll see the green stuff on the hill. That is the view from my house just out there where I'm talking to you from at the moment, but it's still dark here. He taught me and gave me a new perspective on life. As I travel around the world, I meet hundreds of people like that flea in the bottom of the jar. They've tried, but they've given up. They have never had anyone show them a perspective of how they could jump a different way. One day I was shown that perspective and I jumped out of my jar and I've never been back there since. So as farmers, we all have lots of banks. We have a money bank. We have a water bank. We have a fertilizer bank. We have a stock condition bank. We have a natural capital bank. We have a relationship bank. How important are relationships? A good friend said to me today, one day, the three most important things in life and business: relationships, relationships, relationships. Just like your money bank, all those banks can be built in good times and drawn down on bad times. And we have an emotional bank. How is our well-being? How are we off for love? How are we off for purpose? How are we off for hope? How are we off for connection? I'd like to leave it there now. I've got more slides, but I think I'll leave it there and we'll go to some questions and see what comes up. If somebody would like to take over that process.
Yeah, no problem at all. We're still able to see your PowerPoint at the moment. So if you have slides and you want to bring them up, maybe it's worth keeping it there. Okay, so we will open the floor to questions. Cofiwch os wantanwch chi gofyn cwestiwn, I clicio ar y botwm Q&A ar eich sgrin a teipiwch y cwestiwn mewn i'r bwlch. Remember, if you would like to ask a question, please click the Q&A button on your screen and type your question in the box. We've had a couple of questions coming in already. One here that we have: do you think it's better for people to act individually to drive change or collectively as an industry?
Without doubt, collectively. Individual actions are just fine, but they tend to lack power, and they nearly always have a lack of width of understanding. So each one of us feels very empowered about our own personal opinion, but not always are our opinions regardful of other people. And, you know, one of the things, my life, if anyone wishes to buy The Resilient Farmer, it'll give you a deep insight into my journey of change. And it's in the year it was released, it was a bestseller here. My first years in farming were all about me working as hard as I could. I was an incredibly committed and hard-working individual, but I didn't use the power of everybody around me. And when I wrote my book and then it was organised by another person and I read it myself, it just became abundantly clear the gross errors that I'd made in my dutiful commitment to my country and to my farm. A, I'd forgotten to look after myself, and B, the only solution I had for problems was to work harder. The man that's standing in front of you today is a collaborator with human beings. I have built the most amazing team. Our farm grew from 206 hectares to today 2,300 hectares. It went from me and my wife working in a broken kind of way on the farm, desperately trying to make things work, to a place that now employs 5 full-time staff and has increased its environmental footprint, its economic footprint, and its social footprint out of all consideration. So the answer to the question is collaboration with other people. That doesn't mean you need a huge team, but just teamwork is vital. Find a team, set some goals, have a crack.
Following on from that then, a question here. When you are building a team around you, how do you get them to fly at the front sometimes?
We set up a board, an advisory board on our farm. The first few meetings were just a waste of time. I thought to myself, what the hell's this? Sat there and we've gone nowhere. But what we did is on that board is my wife and myself, and we're 50% shareholders. Our oldest son and his wife, and they're 50% shareholders. And then we imported a guy from Wellington who's he's been the CEO of a lot of the major agricultural businesses in New Zealand over his lifetime. And he's our chairman. And what he's actually helped us to do is to really save us having to learn a lot of things. He just brings things to the table all the time, which enables us to avoid a lot of the troubles which other people seem to fall into all the time. So we import as a family the knowledge that we need to make our journey as safe as possible. My favourite one-liner is the sweetest fruits are on the outside branches. When I was a young farmer, I was working frantically and feverishly to collect the fruits for my life from those outside branches. But when things became impossibly hard, I went down to the trunk. I laid off my staff, I stopped spending money, and I threw my hands around the trunk of that tree. It felt safe for a month or two, but what is there nothing of on a trunk of a tree? There is no fruit. And that group, I got a group of science professionals around me, and we set out on a new journey to build and grow a new system of farming that could cope with the dry of New Zealand's east coast. That model has taken off over New Zealand in an amazing way, and now parts of Australia. It's highly exciting as a Kiwi to go to Australia and teach them about dry. I love it. So you know, what I find with a lot of farmers is they think that the answer to every problem is to bury themselves deeper in their business. The actual reality is quite the opposite. And to make the change in your mindset is really, really challenging. But if you get somebody, a professional coach, I coach people all the time here, and the reward that I get when I change what people believe they're capable of doing it's given me more joy than anything else I've ever done in my life.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's so nice to hear. So the question here then, what was your first step from resistant to resilient?
Oh, that's an awesome question. I had to completely break. So I had a complete mental breakdown. 5 years of depression. Just incredibly lucky that I had a beautiful wife who didn't leave me, because if she had, that probably would have been the finish. But she didn't, and she says to people now she's bloody pleased she stayed, because I turned into a reasonable old bugger again. I think she always believed that the man that she married was still in there somewhere. I changed because I had to, and I'm so disappointed in myself that I had to get so low before I realised where I was wrong. But when I think back to that time, I had no idea of what was happening in my life and why it wasn't working. And the step from one side to the other was the hardest step I've ever had to make in my life. But if you believe what I do, is most of the good in our lives is born from our hardest times. I now look at that period of 5 years as the luckiest thing that ever happened to me. From the age of 4, all I wanted to do was be a successful farmer. And the reason I think I broke was because I was far too clever to realise that my failure was successful. I couldn't convince my own mind. The sad part about that was I was born in the most loving family, the best ever parents, but they didn't have the teaching ability to teach me the stuff I needed to know around that. And I often get young people come to me and I say to them, have you got a mentor? And they'll say, oh, yeah, mum and dad. And I say, well, kind of reckon you're big enough now. You really need to go outside of mum and dad, because do you know what? I had great parents, but when it came to the stuff I really needed to learn, they couldn't tell me. And that's the power of mentoring. And any of you watching this presentation that feel that you know it all, you're a danger to yourself. We all need to learn that the real special fruit of the world is available on those small branches. Remember my one-liner, the sweetest fruits are on the outside branches. But we need to engage the wisdom of those around us who can help us to pick our fair share of fruit safely.
Thank you for that. A question has come in here about mentoring. Who was your first go-to mentor?
The first mentor I had was a guy called Johnny Peter, and he rang me one day, and from the time I first started farming, I always regarded him as one of the best farmers in the district. But I never seemed to be able to get really close to him. And then one day, while the drought was still on, he rang me and he said, I'm setting up a group. The state of this district is disgusting, and I'd like you to join with me, and let's try and find a way out of this. And at the time, I thought, oh, the group will be a waste of time, but here's my opportunity to get closer to that man. One of the great things, another one of the great cues for mental well-being is giving. And that was deeply ingrained in me as a child. I had a very religious upbringing, and my parents both were deep into giving. And I thought to myself, it'd probably be good for me to give a bit to that process. I didn't know at that time, but I joined that group. In no time at all, I became its chairman. There was a government-supported process. 6 scientists were employed. I pigged on the results of that. I absolutely indulged in it. I threw away my comfort zone. I dived into my courage zone. I grabbed hold of those scientists and sucked them for every little bit of knowledge. And I learned a new way of doing business and life. That was my huge journey, like the flea. They taught me a different way to jump. So the flea jumped and it jumped and it jumped, and it just kept hitting the same clear plastic, and it couldn't understand why it could not jump out of that jar. That was Doug Avery. But when I learned to jump a different way, all of a sudden, the clear plastic had gone. The things that I couldn't see were removed, and I could see how I could behave and act in a different way. It's the only thing that I'm interested in doing for the rest of my life, is pulling the plastic away and helping people to learn to jump in a different way. So it turns back. What do you believe? What do you think you can do in the balance of your life? What banks do you need to top up? What learning do you need to do today? Who do you need to pull in? Some people will say to me, I can't afford to do that, Doug. And I'll put it on you a different way. You can't afford not to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Think of the dice of life, risk on every face. I've got a lot of friends who said that what I was doing was way too risky. It was different. It was change. And I look at them now and I say, well, you hung on to your comfort zone. And that was the biggest risk that I could see of the whole thing. So if you believe you live on a planet where what you are doing will never need to change to stay current, hang on there, but don't cry when it turns wrong for you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Sage words there, I think. Question here, which I'm sure will ring bells with a lot of farmers in Wales. How do you stop worrying about things you can't control, like COVID-19, Brexit, and the weather?
Well, it's interesting. I had quite a few more slides to show, and they were coming up, so I'm pleased that we actually stopped like this, because it's good to do a bit of both. At not the last Rugby World Cup, and Welshmen are very familiar with rugby. We know that here in New Zealand. All Black coach Steve Hansen had just played a game which notably the All Blacks had won, and the reporter said, Mr. Hansen, and this is the biggest message I got out of that Rugby World Cup. We actually went on to win it, by the way. The biggest message I got out of it, he shoved the microphone in his face and said, Mr. Hansen, are you worried about next week? And Hansen looked straight down the barrel of the camera and he said, worry is the most wasted human emotion.
Because it's out of your control.
Can somebody, is anybody listening to this, ever boosted their opportunity to do anything with worry? So one of the great parts about becoming a resilient person, and you could do this, write down a list of the things that you're concerned about right now. So when I was in Britain in October last year, everyone was telling me they were worried about Brexit. Along came something that supersized that. No one was talking Brexit for ages. Wasn't even on the front page of the newspaper for the first time for about 3 or 4 years. We hear all about it here in New Zealand. New Zealand was worried about this, was worried about that. The worry did no good. But actually, write down a list of the things that you're concerned about, and then write a list of the things that you can influence. And the man that's sitting in front of you, I do that all the time. And I put all my energy into the things that I can influence. I can't change the outcome of COVID-19. I can abide by the rules as they're thrown in front of us. I can't change Brexit. I can't change the fact that China have just blown into Hong Kong today and the whole dynamics. But what I can change is the way that I hug my wife. I look after my family. I focus on the good and quality things that I can do for my farm. The number of people that I can influence to think more positively about their life. Those are the things that Doug Avery can concentrate on. It's the journey of life is about the mindset that you take in. Another one line that I love, your attitude will determine your altitude. And so if you write things down, and I'm a great fan of measuring, we measure absolutely everything on our farm now. I run around with my measuring stick all the time. My philosophy is, if you can't measure it, it doesn't exist. That's the top line. Think about that. If you're not sure whether that's right or not, Google Brené Brown, B-R-E-N-E, Brown, and there's a little thing on vulnerability. Listen to her, absolutely fabulous. And then the second line with the measuring stick is, if you don't measure it, you can't manage it. If I was lost in a forest couldn't see where the hell to go, just trees everywhere. And then I suddenly thought to myself, oh, Doug, you silly fool, you've got a map in your pocket. So I reach into my pocket, I get the map out, I lay it on the ground, I get down and I look at the map, and I think, still don't know where I am. So when you actually take your mind away from worrying and all those destructive thoughts, fear, and you start to impose on your life a sense of destination and journey, you start thinking about your future story, you measure where you are now, that's discovering your why, which I said right at the start. You need to find out where your head and heart is. Then start to dream. Dreaming's great. Where will I be in a month? Where will I be in a year? Turn yourself to be the future creates the present type of person. Every now and again, I revert to worry, and then I remind myself it's the most wasted human emotion.
Thank you very much. I know that you have to shoot off very quickly at the end of this webinar, so we'll just have one last question. We do have a couple here, unfortunately, we're not going to have time for. But the last one is going to be, how do you encourage an older lead goose to let somebody else have a go to lead the pack?
Over here we have goose shooting season. I'm a classic example of a wise goose. I've still got a ton of life in me, as you can see. I'm passionate as hell about agriculture. I stopped in preference for my son to run our business. Our business is our future vision for our business is to be the best sheep and beef farm in New Zealand. And at the time of COVID-19, a lot of New Zealand farmers are pushing back on environmental processes. We've accelerated them. If you want an awesome business, if you want awesome family succession, if you want agriculture to die for, you have to create a pathway for young people because they are the future. And I always tell people, and they say to me, I can't believe, Doug, that you've moved off the farm. And I say, my life is more exciting now. And one of the greatest things that I see is the enthusiasm, passion, and commitment that younger generation has brought to that business. And it's now become the envy of a whole lot of people over here. And they look and they think, God, you're away fishing and enjoying yourself all the time. I did 46 years of absolute commitment to that business, but I'm too old and too slow for it now. My job in that farm now as a member of that board is simply one thing, to support the leadership of that business. And so I go out flapping my wings out all over the world, picking up ideas, and I bring them back to that farm. And I'd like to add one last thing to you Welsh farmers. You've spent a lifetime worrying about Kiwi farmers like us. Well, I tell you what, our government's planting our country in trees, pine trees as carbon credits. The fall of the sheep industry is happening at 1,000 miles an hour. And I'm just going to keep charging people here more and more and more for that Sunday roast. So we're not going to ever be a problem for you ever again. It's not going to happen. So don't live in the past and worry about things that are not happening. Join us into the future and let's go for an amazing ride.
Thank you very much, Doug. I think that's a great note to finish on as well. Yn ffodus, mae amser yn bryn, felly mae rhaid i ni orffen. Diolch yn fawr pawb i chi am eich cyfraniad. We do have to finish there, so I'd like to thank everybody for their contributions this evening.